focused on football performance. I work within the sports science team with the technical and medical staff of AFC Ajax, and I'd like to give you some insights on how we do this. All right, so first let's start with why do we do this? Why do we collect all that data? Why did clubs even start going here? Well, it's because we believe that with the correct use of technology and careful data analysis, we can provide objective information that helps coaches to make better decisions for each individual player as well as the team. So all that we do always have to lead back to that, no matter where it's going to be small questions or big data. In 2011, we started with a biomechanics lab so we can study the technique of a football player. We started with tracking on all of our pitches inside our dome and actually also within our stadium so that we could follow every centimeter of what they were doing. So how does this tracking work? Most of you guys are probably familiar with this, but players are wearing a vest and we're not using GPS, we're using local position measurements, which means that we can also have relative positions. We store heart rate data, and we all store this on a base level. So we do all training sessions, all exercises, code all that, and we do this always, which means that we have a big data set of all our exercises, all our player performance on the training session as well as on the games. Now, I'll explain later on why this is important. We started, like all clubs, with, okay, now we're going to compare our players within the team, within different positions, or do some simple technical analysis like distances between players or how much room is there for a shot, offside line, those kind of things. But that was only the start. Something else that we did, and that's within our sports science lab and dome, is things like gauge behavior. So you see that blue circle, that's actually where the goalkeeper is looking at. We do their diving performance, so the exact push-up force and angles to see if we can improve that performance. So these are just a few examples of what type of data you collect in a biomechanics lab. And then shot analysis, we at the start related this to how do they perform the shot, and is that related to any groin injuries or groin pain that they get, but actually also how do you perform a real good long distance shot. Other things that we did is things like testing players on their physical qualities and of course points of improvement. So we, for example, designed an agility test, but because we always want to transfer everything to what we do, as I said, to football and to the game, we wanted to make sure that this was actually, wait, one back. Can you play this video, please? So that pattern that they're doing is actually based on the pattern that they do in the game. So we used our game data and able to design better functional player tests to be able to say something about their performance. Well, from there on, can you play this video as well, please? From there on, we designed the test both for academy as for our first team, and we let the guys perform on this these tests that are especially designed for the way we move in football. Now you see here, maybe you guys know him, Justin Kluivert, at an early age. This was one of his specialties, and you can actually see, if you know him, that this transfers to the game really well. So we're now gonna look at one of his youth games, for example.
Dan Ajax in de aanval met Kluivert. Kluivert die dit seizoen belangrijker en belangrijker wordt voor Ajax B1. Hier gaat hij langs 4 man. Kluivert en het is 1-0. Wat een geweldig doelpunt van Justin Kluivert. In het hol van de leeuw.
So that was Justin still at the age of under 16. Then he moved to the first team at a fairly early stage. And then from there we sold him for a good price, which is nowadays one of the things that Ajax role also is. But if you can see here, what we try to do is link our data sometimes. So for example, with the player performance, we saw that everything that we captured over years was sort of disturbed by something we call the growth spurt. So as you can see here, all these guys are the same age, but Matthijs de Ligt, that you guys might also know, he's in our first team at the moment, was 1.8 years, biological years, older than Justin at the stage, which means that with Matthijs we start on a very early age with more like strength and conditioning work. So we try to get them within our system as soon into the first team as we can, which means if they have the opportunity to do that physically seen, then we actually want to push them to make their debut as early as possible. All right, so this is just a few examples of what data we collect and what we were working on when we started. And the main thing is that it was always research questions that led to the collection of data. So we were collecting data on physical parameters in training sessions to define load. We were testing players' physical qualities and points of improvement. We had better understanding of their physical development. We did some functional research on kicking or goalkeeper diving saves. And we were providing feedback on the physical performers to players and staff. And it's always done in a report. So it's a moment in time, something happens, you collect your data, you report on it, and you send it back to the coach. But it's not interactive, it's not live, it's just a moment in time. You captured something and you have a solution, or at least an answer. But then doing this and starting more and more of these data initiatives, it got a little bit more complex. Because as I said, we are capturing position every day. 1,000 data points per second. Then we also add heart rate, 30 data points per second. We add video images. Then from there, we live, or I should say real time, compare it to their maximum heart rate, their maximum speed per player, and their weight. From there, we calculate a few more variables that are actually given back on the training session real time. Because I don't want to know what someone's heart rate was a minute ago, because in a minute he should already be recovered. So I want to know it live. Also, we steer and operate our cameras completely based on the position of the players of the field. So this is all automated. If the clubs that are here today still have their poor video analysts out on a windy platform, please tell them that this is possible. I mean, in Spain it might not be so bad, but in England and the Netherlands, you don't want to be out there where you can actually add more value, making clips, making presentations for the coaches. All right, from there, add a few event data. This is what we get from our matches. Add a few questionnaires that we ask them in the morning. Add a few simple things like length, weight, power output on a test, and then derived variables from that. And this is, and even more on a daily basis, what we collect of all the players from the first team all the way into the under-19s, and for some of the variables even all the way into our under-7s. So here we came to the point where we say, okay, we're not just collecting data to answer one specific question, but we're actually doing big data. Now, what's big data? Does anyone have a good, clear explanation of what big data is? Well, we all sort of go, it has something to do with volume, velocity, variety. So by now I can say in football, yes, we're working with big data, and even just on the player performance part. So I'm not talking about ticketing or any other related area. In football, I'm just talking on player performance. We do big data. So what do the data analysts do? They're trying to collect, sort, removing errors, adding more levels like what team were they playing, how old were they, what was their biological age, to be able to make meaning of this data. And basically what we want to do is we want to create future-proof variables. So not only variables that answer our questions today, but also variables that answer our future questions. And this is a big thing in how you store your data and how you actually tag your data and handle it. All right, so many clubs are at this stage. Like they do quite a good job with collecting all the data and then adding different levels to try and make some meaning out of it. And then you're really enthusiastic as a sports analyst, and you go like, hey, cool, I got all this big data. I would like to answer some more questions now, questions that are coming from the field, because all of a sudden it changed from collecting data because you had an answer to collecting data and looking for what answers you can find for interesting questions that might be out there. Okay, so you go up to the coach or you go up to the head of scouting and you say, hey, we collected so many cool data about our team and maybe even of other teams. How can this help you make better decisions for your players as well as the team? And they go, best case scenario, I'll give it a try. So can you maybe now help me to find a fantastic player that fits really well within my team? All right, so this is where it gets complicated. This is where most of us are not so good at, asking the right questions to all this data that we now collected. It's basically what we're doing now is saying, okay, so I go into some web shop and trying to find beautiful shoes that match with my favorite outfit. Well, you might find that if you specify a little bit more what you're looking for. So in this case, let's specify. Let's go with an outfit that's black and white. It's for a special occasion. You want to dress up a little bit. And an outfit contains at least pants, a shirt, in this case a tie, and you want to find some shoes. And then in this case you say, okay, for this occasion, good leather shoes. We like leather shoes because leather gets more beautiful over time, and that's basically what Ajax does. We get a beautiful player, but we spend some more time with him and then he gets better. And then we have our outfit really well defined with that data, but I actually have to specialize a little bit more what I'm looking for. So now something changes within that team. I want a little more sparkling. So if you looked at the tie, hey, all of a sudden now we're going to make it even more special. And now I'm looking for special shoes that add a spark to this outfit. So I've defined my outfit. It needs to be dress up, and it needs to be black and white. And I want to look for some shoes that actually fit the same searching criteria as I did before, but with a little sparkle. So this is basically what I'm trying to explain is, to get good answers, you have to know how to ask your questions. You have to define your play principles as specific as possible and able to, for the sports analyst, to give you a good answer. And I think this is where the sport analysts have a good job to help you to do that, as well as yourself thinking, okay, I really need to specialize what I'm looking for. How is this done? You have multiple parameters. Let's keep it simple. Say we have a few physical parameters like top speed and number of sprints. We have some technical events like transition and passes coming from an event file from a game. And then I want to combine parameters to say something about, for example, the game speed of a player compared to his top speed. So I need my sprint tests and I need my game speed, and I can compare those two. If I want to play according to a 3-second rule, for that I need time, the speed that they have, or actually closing the distance between themselves and the ball or the offensive team. And I need to know when the transition period was. So I need to combine those data sources again and able to get to answer those questions. And then if you find, for example, the last one, you search for a fast left winger that can provide many assists over long distance, and you found that within your data, then the coaches always ask you, okay, cool, can I now look at it? And that's when you have to have video that can actually show the timelines that you just selected. So those moments when those combined parameters happen, they need to be able to be visible on a video timeline. And that's where it gets complicated. We'll come back to that later. Okay, so how do we do this at Ajax at the moment? Of course, we start with collection. Then we do storage on the cloud base. We do some simple analysis like what team was he in, what age was he, what teams do we want to compare him with. Some things like chronicle load, overtime, intervals. And we all do this in a way so we can actually build filters in this. And then your output all of a sudden can be in daily reports. Just use Power BI for that. Week load, we can do month to seasonal overviews. We can do in-depth analysis over time within our team. And more important, before where we were just comparing players within a team, we can now compare players. We can now compare teams. So we can say, are the under-19s actually getting enough load enabled for them to reach the level of the first team, and not have a 40% load difference and then release them into the first team, and after 3 days see him not coping anymore because the load was just completely different that they were getting before and that they are supposed to get within the first team. But then even more important, we can start to compare clubs if we have league-wide deals on data, and we can even start to compare leagues. But for these last two, it's actually quite hard sometimes, because all clubs by now have their own definitions of what variables they think is important, because this all came from one specific research question at that time that they wanted to answer. And I think at this stage, we really need to start thinking about how can we sort of align at least some of the most principal parameters over teams and over leagues, so that we can start really make a good comparison between those. Nice for not only our players as well as our staff, but also for the board, is that we now have live dashboards, which means that every second they can be updated on the performance of players. So instead of reporting one at a time, we can now do that all the time. As I said before, we want to combine data, but also have the moment in time on video, being able to select that on the video just by the parameters of your data. But this is actually quite hard at the moment, because event data, for example, from Opta, they get post-processed, and because timeframes get out, and also it's sometimes it's actually manually tracked. So sometimes that's out a little bit, as well as the positional data that get post-processed as well, and some time frames that contain mistakes are taken out, so the time frames are not the same anymore, and the timeline changes. And then if I add my video and it's done, for example, in a different timeline, it's really hard to actually do this with the data and combining it. So the only one that I know so far who can do, at least in our stadium, because they have the LPM system plus the full science video, is Game On. And here's an example of the app that they provide us for training sessions. Because we're not wearing vests in the game, we cannot do this for games right now. But if the data providers come up with a solution for equal timelines, we would be able to do this on games as well. And you can just live move players, add distances between players, and this is for a full game. So there are some options out there where you can like make 5-minute clips or really short parts, but this can be done on a full game, which really helps you if you come up with a good variable or a good combination of parameters, and you want to show that back to the coach and saying, okay, we were talking about this 3-second rule. These are all the times that we're doing it right. All right, so to sum this all, we need to combine the data sources to get the bigger picture. And what we're trying to do is we try to give the expert eye in hand and have real-time data on the field and automate, of course, the video operation. We want to define the weakest links and also their physical qualities. And we all have this in the same data warehouse. Then we want to keep an overview of the development. So we want to combine, as I said, the data for a bigger picture. We want to use it for self-reflection, so get into their phones, as well as using live dashboards in the training, in the dressing rooms. And of course, we want to answer the questions that come from the field. And we do this with the support of the big data. And then most important, and this is really going to be the take-home message for today, is think about a structure for your data, so you can not only answer today's questions, but also ask today's and tomorrow questions based on the data that you're collecting now and in the past. Just one other thing I want to talk to you about is, I've heard these last couple of days, I heard a lot of stories about big data, and this is what we can do, and it would be so cool if we could have this, and we can add virtual reality and artificial intelligence. But I think at this stage, using the data is really like roll up your sleeves, like dive into it, go into it, build a platform that works for you and specialize what you're looking for, because I think that's still the most difficult part of trying to use all that data for your questions and for your club. So that's for today. Thank you so much.